We, the authors, we know the topic. We think we have presented it correctly, but we have presented it for somebody else to read and appreciate. So the peer reviewer is on the other side, is reviewing my paper to make it better and not necessarily to say it's not a good paper. That helps me because at the end of the day, my paper would be even better than the first time when I submitted it. I started in 1978 and working in this area. In 1986, we started our company, Pranab Saha Engineers, Inc., an acoustical noise and vibration consulting company. As we started working, I found that all of my customers, they wanted to know why and how. That means, why are you doing this study? How do you do this study? And as I had to answer those questions, I realized that we really do not have a systematic way of learning things in the mobility NVH industry. One of the things that I like the most about SAE in the publications area that we, many of us who are in the industry, can contribute, share what we have learned with the other people who will be in that field. I found there was a gap between what we learned in noise and vibration in the university and how we applied them in the mobility industry. In general, in the university, you do things based on the fundamentals, based on the theory. So their documents, their papers are going to have more fundamental and theoretical things. In the industry, where we are actually manufacturing things, we do research, but our research is not as fundamental. It doesn't need to be because we have to make a product. So our research may be more development work. That has a long term value because otherwise, other people will not be able to come up with better products. Obviously, the academia is very important. The governmental organizations are very important because they built the seed in the industry. We actually cultivate that and make products. So we need to look at this academia versus the industry, that they are both very important. And I'm very glad to see that the SAE journals allow both of them to be in the system as long as there is a long term value to those documents. We, the researchers or developers who are sharing the information, we know the topic. That's not the problem. The point is sometimes when we write or share the information, we may miss some critical things because that's so common that we think everybody knows it. As an author, I like the peer review process because that makes my paper even more complete. One of the advantages of getting it peer reviewed is they can identify the positive thing of the document that we are sharing, and if there are some limitations, if there are some errors that happen by mistake, they can identify that by looking at from a totally different perspective. Once I accept a paper to edit as an associate editor, I first try to get a general understanding what the paper is about so I can select the right type of reviewers. If all the reviewers comment come out in one direction, that means that must have a value. So I try to emphasize their findings and share that with the authors. If we find that, for example, one of the reviewers comments and judgments are very different from the other two reviewers because, after all, this is subjective to some extent. So I would like to see why are they so different. And in some cases, I may communicate with the reviewer and share that with the author. For a young professional, first of all, you have to have some desire to share your knowledge with others. That means you have to be able to write some papers first, which has been peer reviewed. Because once you see somebody else's peer review comments, now you are building and understanding what the peer review is all about. Now, when you become a peer reviewer, you put yourself on their side. Why would they like to present this paper or write this paper? That means try to find the positive things first. What is the long term value of this paper? Try to emphasize those things. And if you think that those tools are there, then you judge or review the paper accordingly. An example that one can take an actual paper, all the guidelines that SAE has for reviewing the paper, and show on that paper how those guidelines can be attributed. What does the archival means in that particular paper? It can be a simple paper, but some form of guidelines are necessary certainly for young professionals who would like to be a peer reviewer. I think things are changing and things are changing for the right reason. However, internet cannot teach you everything. There has to be a mentor that needs to be taken to the modern level so that that mentorship is still there, and that also needs to be done in the reviewing process. When I was a graduate student, before my first paper was presented, my professor in his room in the hotel room made me rehearse and present many times before I went the next day for presentation. Around the same time, in one of the largest car company manufacturing company in Detroit, they used to have their engineers go and present internally before they went to Cobo Hall, at that time the World Congress, and made the presentation. That means that mentorship, so that things are done. I think we may have forgotten that. With the AI, that is great, but I need to be able to cite and reference properly. I'm not so sure if I can reference the AIs properly or not, or whether they can really positively contribute to the paper. I became an SAE member, I believe, late 1986. After I became a member, somebody asked me, you should join the standards group. Those days it was Sound and Heat Insulation Committee, which today is Acoustical Materials Committee. And my charter, for a volunteer, they gave me a job to develop a standard SAE J1637, a vibration damping test method. Shortly, I wanted to write papers. I have a PhD degree and I was taught that how to write papers. So I got involved in the SAE Noise and Vibration General Committee. And I'm still active there today. Half the people like me, half the people say, Pranab, you are still working. I had an interest of sharing my knowledge with the other people in the NVH area. And one way to do that is getting involved in events. I'm young at that point, so new in the field. And the way to do that is getting involved in SAE events. SAE gave me an opportunity to instruct in the professional development group. And then gradually, I wanted to know other ways to publicize papers. And that's where I got involved in the journals. And I remember in the old Cobo Hall about 10, 15 years ago, when these journals were getting started, they used to have meetings, and I used to ask if I can come and attend. And the SAE staff and the other editor in chiefs, they were all very nice. They invited me to come in there, and that's how I got involved. And then I was asked if I would like to be an associate editor, and I said certainly. And I felt it'll be a good thing if there's a book, My Legacy, and it's a technical book, but it's a very easy to understand book. So I'm very fortunate that SAE has given me these opportunities. I also hope in return SAE found some benefit from a volunteer like me. Anybody listening to this message, if you are interested, if you have the time, become a volunteer, in this case, SAE International.